Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us all. I am going to share my screen with all of you, and here we go. Thank you all for joining us today, and welcome. The discussion today is going to be on periodization, and that sounds way more complicated than what it really is. You're really talking about periods of time, doing different things. That's me, and the book that I co-wrote. And here we go. So, origins of periodization, this is the agenda. Then we're going to talk about periodization, what it is, and specificity. Also, the best times to change groups as you're going through periods of time and doing different things. What's the best time if you feel you can go faster? What's the best time to jump to a faster group? You can always go to a slower group at any time if you're feeling sick or you didn't get a lot of sleep or you're out partying all night long or whatever the reason. There's no bad reason. You can always jump to a slower group, even in the middle of a workout, a run, walk, or walk on a Saturday. You can always stop and wait for the next group to come along and then jump in. That's why we start out in order, and that's why it's so important that we do start in order. And then I'll take questions and answer. Also, we're going to discuss tonight the importance of taper, which begins next week. Next week, we will be on a taper. So we're going to discuss a little bit of the importance of a taper. Here we go. History of periodization. Arthur Lydiard, pictured up here, was really this unique kind of a guy. He's from New Zealand, was from New Zealand. Sadly, he's no longer with us. But it is said that everyone does Arthur Lydiard. You can hate Arthur Lydiard's method. You can love Arthur Lydiard's method of training for a marathon or an endurance race, a 5K, 10K. But everyone does Arthur Lydiard. He was a charismatic character, I'm told. He used to run across the plains of New Zealand, up and down the hills, and you could hear him like a mile or two away, and all these guys would be laughing and carrying on, trotting along, easy pace, comfortably. And people thought, these people are nuts. And they'd go for 20, 30 miles. They just loved going. But lo and behold, he gained a positive reputation because those guys who were going with him oftentimes were winning gold medals in the Olympics. They were no slouches with Arthur Lydiard. His method worked, and it worked really well at the highest of levels. Then Tudor Bompa came along. He was a PhD in exercise physiology who coached bodybuilders, these strong guys. He's from Romania during not Russia, but during the Soviet bloc, where they could actually test athletes, do muscle biopsies of athletes to get scientific results because they owned the athletes. Probably highly unethical, but they did get a lot of scientific results and understanding of things like how do you progress a schedule for strength building. And part of that had to do with a book that he wrote when he defected and came to the western part of our world. And he actually settled in Toronto, Canada, where I believe he lives to this day with his wife. And I think he's in his 90s, and I think he's still alive. But he wrote a very important book called The Periodization Training for Sports. And it was mostly about strength training. But what it did was, and this is very common, the coaches like Arthur Lydiard oftentimes in the past will give a theory, and then the scientists like Tudor Bompa would come along and show why it made sense from a scientific perspective. And that's what he did. Even though he was a weight training coach, a strength building coach, these guys who lift enormous weights for the Olympics, he was a big, high-level coach. What they'll do is they'll build more and more and more weights. Then they'll change off, and instead of do repetitions of 10 repetitions in one set and do 5 repetitions with slight increasing weight. Then they'll suddenly do 50 repetitions with way lower weight, and then 100 repetition sets with way lower weight. And then for 3 or so weeks, then they'll go back to 6 weeks of building more and more and more each week with a little bit more and more each set, more, and same 10 repetition sets or so. Well, that became the theory that worked and made sense for Arthur Lydiard because he was building more and more and more volume the same way we do on our schedule. Then he would have a taper week. He was doing speed work instead of higher sets, right? Higher repetition sets. He was doing speed work. So the theory and the science really made sense. And today we use Tudor Bompa's science to prove the theory that Arthur Lydiard had so many years ago. And Tudor Bompa went around doing lectures, and so did Arthur Lydiard until he died, I believe in 2005, something like that. He also was pretty old when he passed on. But that's where all of this comes from. And that's what you're about to hear a little about. How does this work and why? So you just heard about Tudor Bompa's theory with strength training. Now we're going to talk about periodization training for endurance athletics. Really, like I said, founded by Arthur Lydiard, who still has a school, I believe, in Colorado somewhere, an institution with his name, and they still teach coaches to do his method specifically. But the essence of what he does, we do with our group, the LA Roadrunners. And all the groups that I've heard of do some form of what he used to do. Now, the first half of the season really predominantly focused on building an aerobic base. You're doing easy, don't forget, easy pace builds endurance, the ability to go farther. Speed work builds speed, right? You want to go fast, you need to run fast or walk fast or do both, run, walk fast. That's where you get faster. So there is this yin and yang, but because it's such a long distance, 26.2 miles marathon, we put an emphasis on doing far more on endurance work, the low heart rate work to build endurance to go farther than we do the speed work because we're going farther, 26.2 miles. At any rate, so the first half of the season really is a progression of mostly building low heart rate volume week after week after week. I'm going to discuss in a little while how that breaks down. Normally, our first 5 weeks of this season have been a little different from the norm. Like I said, next week is a taper week, which is roughly almost half of what this week will be in terms of total volume for the entire week. You'll note we're doing next week. By the way, next week we will not be in Santa Monica. We are going to be in Griffith Park for a morning of terror, actually fun. We're going to be running through the haunted hayride, which is bigger than ever. It's like they built this city with, and of course we're doing it in the daytime, so it's not that creepy, and no one's going to run out at you, and no creepy music will be playing, and none of that, no lighting, anything. But we're going to be running through it, and it'll be kind of fun. But it's way bigger than it's ever been that I've seen in all the years I've run through that. We're going to start there, take pictures, and then we'll go on to do our run in Griffith Park. That's a week from 2 days from now, Saturday. The Santa Monica group is going to Griffith Park, and hopefully the Balboa Park Saturday, they'll join us Saturday as well for a 5-mile run in Griffith Park. And then we'll also be in Balboa Park again. Anyway, regardless. So the first half of the season really is prime focus, build endurance, especially for first timers who really don't have a volume of endurance, low heart rate work that they've done, or maybe they quit after their last marathon and they've lost it all and they need to rebuild again from scratch. There is no bad in endurance sport, but you need to build that endurance for obvious reasons. You're going a long way. Second half the season is more about finding what is marathon race pace, also called, we can refer to that as like lactate threshold, but we refer to it as marathon race pace. What is half marathon race pace? What does it feel like at your current ability as you're progressing toward that marathon? That's the only reason you do marathon race pace, is to get a feel of it. During the LA Marathon, when you're going up one of those big hills in the first 6 miles of the marathon, you want to know what that race pace feels like so you don't go up that hill faster. In other words, as we were just discussing before we started recording, you don't want your heart rate to start going way up. It's not about race pace anymore on an uphill. It's about heart rate. And you want to know what it feels like when you're going up those hills or down those hills. So you're not wasting time going down that hill. You can speed it up or, like I said, slow down in the uphill. Last few weeks, exponential taper, similar to next week, where you rebuild hormone levels. And we're going to discuss that all coming up. So, beginning of the season, you want to start. This is a very common graph. It's in my book and many other books. I did not create this. You want to start with more general training. That could be, it could be swimming to loosen up. It could be playing tennis to get in a little speed work and agility. Could be biking up hills to build strength, quad strength, biking uphill. It doesn't have to all be running or walking. It could be other things as well. But and definitely, it can definitely, you want it to include more strength training. Because let's face it, the volume of time you're spending in running, run, walk, or walking is not anywhere near what it's going to be as the season progresses, as we build up in miles. So you do definitely want to get in more, spend more time of that time that you have doing strength training, maybe 2, maybe 3 days a week of strength training, depending on how strong or weak you currently are, depending on whether your needs are upper body, lower body, legs, core would be most of it. But you're still, you're rocking your arms. So you still need to build those biceps up just to keep that forearm up, that you're going to be rocking that whole 26.2 miles, right? Arms are not at your sides. They're up, running or walking. Same form for your arms. So a little upper body is good, mostly core and legs. But early season, the point to this, periodization, the period early season, do more strength training. I only have 1 day of strength training built into your schedule. That's only because I don't know how much time all of you have. So I definitely did want to get in at least 1 day of strength training. If you can work in 2 or 3 days right now of strength training into your busy schedule, great. Don't build weights too fast. Similar to periodization of running, you don't suddenly want to jump up in volume in training. Same thing with weights. Same theory of periodization. Fit strength training into either a day off or an easy day where you're not doing hard, intense training. That would be, and do it after the run, generally speaking, would be a really good time to do it. You could do a little light strength training just to engage muscles. You'll note before we all start running, run, walking, or walking, we do some squats just to engage muscles. But that's not really a volume of strength training. You don't really want to start breaking down muscle tissue as you do with strength training before a run. You'd want to do it more after, because you don't want to get injured on the run. Now, as the season progresses, this downward arrow, you'll note that back here, specific training becomes bigger, more of it. general training like swim, bike, run, strength train becomes less and less and less. You have less and less time to do that kind of thing. You really need to focus more and more and more on the schedule. And the schedule is giving you more and more and more specific run only training. Got it? So, whoops, I need to fix this here for a sec. So there you go on that. Um, Sorry, I'm screwing this up here. Anyway, good enough. Anyway, I just deleted my video. Um, so you want to get more and more specific training because you're going to be needing to do more and more and more volume. So there is that. And less general training. So here we go. If you're going to change groups, the best time to change groups is during a taper. The reason for that, as you're about to see in a minute, is oh, you can't see me. Your volume is going to be way, way less. So in other words, the intensity that you're doing is way, way, way less. But the intensity of speed is going to be increased. So you're going faster, meaning in more intensity, but you're dropping in volume, which is less intensity. If you were building in volume and you were building with speed, that's more intensity on top of more intensity. And remember, you don't want to build too quickly. Well, that's where you can get injured as well. So you don't want to do both faster and farther. Do one or the other. And during taper, when you're doing less, that's the best time to jump to a faster group. As I said before, you can always jump to a slower group anytime, right? It's all about power output. So make sure you really want to make sure that you develop an aerobic base, that low heart rate, easy pace, endurance building, because you need that endurance. That's where you build it. Don't jump to another group just because you can keep up with them. That's not what you want. You want easy pace to be just as it sounds, easy. Not, oh, I can keep up with them. No, 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 no. That's not it. If you're breathing hard when the run ends or run, walk, or walk ends, I'm talking to all human beings, that's too fast. You want it easy from the beginning to the end, and that's where you build the most endurance. You want speed, do short and fast midweek. That's built into your schedule, every schedule, 1 through 5. 5 having the most volume of speed work. 4 actually having the greatest percentage. That's another story. We'll discuss that another day when we discuss schedules. But make sure you got that base, that easy base, that endurance base before you move on, aerobic base, whatever you want to call it, before you move to a faster group. So traditionally, we would build and build and build and build, and then we'd have a taper at the end. Now, what the heck is wrong with just a lateral build that never ends? So here's, I'm just going to draw in a line of basically power output. You're doing more and more and more week after week. Each pyramid, each little line here defines another week. Okay? So you're going more and more and more and more, and then taper at the end. Each week, you're going more and more. Now, let's get rid of the weeks. So essentially, this red line is what you'd be looking at. You're looking at energy expenditure, power output, whatever you want to call it, more and more and more and more, and then a taper at the end. Now, hormone levels are inverse relationship to energy expenditure. In other words, your hormones are going to be, this is a black line I'm drawing in now, your hormone levels are going to go down as your energy, as you're doing more and more and more, as your energy, your power output is going up, your hormone level is going down and down and down. Well, who cares? Hormones, it's important. It's important to care. Hormone levels are things like human growth hormone, creatine kinase, and a couple other hormones that rebuild muscle tissue. So similar to bodybuilding, you're breaking down muscle tissue to get a bigger volume of muscle, right? To get bigger, to get stronger. Similar with running. pardon me, as you run farther and farther and farther, you're breaking down some muscle tissue, these little tiny filaments. And sorry, you can't see my hands. These little tiny filaments that you break that are single strands of beads of protein, that molecules that we talked about last week. And you need to rebuild them. That's why we eat protein, because these little muscle filaments are all protein. So you need hormones to rebuild those muscle tissues. So the less hormone levels you have, the less rebuilding, the less recovery you're going to have. You're going to be slower in rebuilding these muscle tissues. You're going to be slower in what we call recovery, right? You need hormones. Testosterone levels for motivation. You may find your motivation is going down and down and down, and you start thinking, well, I got to do it. I got to get out the door. I'm talking men and women. Women have about a fourth the volume of hormones to that of men. And even interestingly enough, men who go through transition to become women get a fourth the hormone level of testosterone that men naturally have. They lose their that level of testosterone. Just from a scientific perspective, I find that interesting. But women still have testosterone, about a quarter, like I said. So hormone levels are really critical. And in order to rebuild hormone levels, that's why we taper, which is what we're doing next week, all of starting Monday, like what is that, 4 days from now. So a normal build would be 3 weeks and then a 1 week taper, which is what we're going to start doing as of next week. We're going to have a taper week, and then we will have 3 weeks of build, 1 week of taper, 3 weeks of build, 1 week of taper. The only reason we did 5 weeks of build early, the beginning of the season, is we lost a week because the Academy Awards shoved the LA Marathon back a little bit, a week. And I had to figure it out. I didn't want to just build mile, 2 mile, and then 3 mile, and then a taper week. That didn't really make sense to me. So we did 5 week build and starting at 3 miles. And then now we have a taper week. So that's why we did the beginning of this season, which is a little unusual, but it seems to have worked. So that's a normal build, 3 week build, 1 week taper to rebuild those hormone levels. So if you're looking at a whole season of weeks of a season, you're building 3 weeks, tapering a week, building 3 weeks, tapering a week. And again, get rid of those little blocks and put in the hormone levels. Whoops, there we go. Energy expenditure. And here come our hormone levels. You will note that at the end of this whole process, if you went back, whoops, we went a little too far forward here. There we go. At the end of a gradual build, a lateral build without taper, you'll note that hormone levels were actually way down, even with the final taper. Your hormone levels only could come up so much. But here, with all these interval tapers, right, your hormone levels have a chance to go back up, then down, then up again, then down, then up, then down. And you end up with way more hormone levels to rebuild muscle tissue and get motivation. And that's why when we do this kind of interval taper system, or what we also called periodization, more and more in each period, those 3 week periods, and then a week of taper, more and more, you end up with more hormones on race day, and you get for the last 3 weeks, you're maybe jittery, and on race day, you are ready to kill because you have so many raging hormones. That's why taper for many people becomes so difficult to tolerate, because their hormones are just raging and they need to use them on race day. So that's obviously, you don't want to taper for too long. That's why our schedule's level 5. And actually, there is a level 6, which is unpublished for our group 0 and 1A and B. 1B can also be on level 5 schedule, depending on the individual. But That's why those schedules only have 2.5 week taper. The rest of our schedules do have a 3 week taper. Everybody's different. Everybody has different needs, but those are the majority. That's pretty much where it is for the final taper. Hopefully that impassions you with a need for the taper, the reason for a need for doing less starting Monday through Sunday of next week. Like I said, Griffith Park is only 5 miler, where this week we're doing 8 miles for groups slower than 4 hours. Groups 4 hours and faster are going 10 miles. So 4 hours and faster are doing 2 miles fast more than the other. I always like to end on this: train smart and train to win, because if you don't, you won't. And if you do, you just might. So with that, I thank you all, and I will see you all at the finish line. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for chiming in. And let me get back to my thing here. And there we go. Does anybody have any questions either in the chat or otherwise? And please let other people know that if they didn't see this thing live, they can watch the replay, which is still recording, and I'll edit out the beginning a little bit. But let's go to our chat. Anything regarding this specific thing? Oh, Angela says, thank you, Coach David. I thank you. Enrique, can you make it bigger? Oh, I know. I already turned it off. But anyway, you can pinch and zoom in on the screen. Oh, gotcha. Anyway, well, that was before we actually began the recorded thing. Gwen says, thank you. Any other questions regarding what we just talked about before I turn off the recording? Anybody? Christina, you always give the greatest tips. Thank you, Coach. Christina, thank you very much. Angela, thank you. Coach David, appreciate that. I am going to, by the way, if you scroll your cursor across the screen, you'll get your command bar at the bottom or top of your screen. You can click on the audio button with the icon that kind of looks like an antique microphone, and sort of looks like this one here almost. And you can click on that and you can talk, or you can type something into the chat, which I'm also looking at. Going once. Any questions on what I just talked about? And then we'll turn the recording off and I'll answer questions you may have about anything. Going twice, going 3 times. Okay, I'm going to turn off the recording. I do want to say thank you all for those watching this recorded version. And for those of you who are watching the online version, hang on. I'll answer all of your live questions. But for those of you watching the recorded version, thank you and good night. Take care, everybody, and have an inspired run, walk, or walk.